Okay, welcome everybody to the Europe Talk Solidarity webinar series. We are still admitting people as they come, so we are so happy to see so many people here. My name is Tali Padan, and I will be facilitating today's webinar along with Elizabeth Einwanger, who's doing the background show. And before I start to introduce what we're going to be doing in today's webinar, I would first like to welcome and introduce the organizer, one of the organizers of this webinar series, who is Miguel Tabera, who is from Europe Solidarity Corps. So please, Miguel.
Thank you, Tali. Yeah, in the name of Salto Research Center European Solidarity Corps, I would like to welcome all of you. Yeah, welcome to the EuroTalk Solidarity webinar for our edition 25. So it is really fantastic to have all of you around here. And it is important to mention this will be the fourth year in a row that we are running these webinars. And each year we choose a new topic. Yeah. And for this year, we decide to focus a little bit, or a little bit more than a bit, in the intersection between solidarity, democracy, and climate justice. Uh, you have to understand climate justice might not be our usual thing to work in the resource center. However, we find that it's an important topic, and Eurotalk Solidarity is the space that we go not only in the context of the European Solidarity Corps program, but in the context of solidarity as such as a value. So therefore, we decide to talk about this year. This year is also a little bit different as the prior years because we had normally our webinars in one month in December. December is the month of solidarity. And this year we decided to do it a little bit more divided. So we have one in October, one in November, and one in December. So it's the first time we're doing like this, and we are looking forward to see how many people are coming and what is going to happen. I would like also to take a little moment to thank the facilitation team, my other colleagues of the other Saltos that are present here, and I'm really happy to be here. So I'm really looking forward for the discussion, that you get something from this. And without further ado, I would say I give you the word, Tali. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. And yes, so as Miguel said, we are taking up the topic of climate justice, which actually drew a lot of interest. We already have a lot of people on the call and more coming, because it is a topic that's very relevant and pressing, and not the easiest topic to cover because it's at the intersection of many different fields, and it is a topic that requires some attention and not necessarily a comfortable attention because it has to do with inequality and injustice as well. So what we are doing for this first webinar is taking up this topic from a few different perspectives. We're going to hear from the research perspective, in the sense it's actually practice-based research, from the policy perspective, and from two projects that have been kind of engaged in this topic, or the topic of climate change. So we would like to also welcome the audience to interact and use the chat. That is, you can write comments as you hear them. You know, some people, when we're in a group together, when we're in a circle, we can see people like nodding and agreeing and not agreeing, but we can't see that here. So you feel free, even just emoticons or anything you feel that you just want to share. The chat can be your space. Also questions. So how we're going to do this is we're going to have the four speakers, one after the other, with no time for questions in between. But at the end, we will leave, hopefully we'll have 20-25 minutes to ask them some questions from you. We've already gotten some really great questions from the registration, so we have those in mind. But please do ask them. If you submitted a question, please ask it again on this chat so we have a kind of fresh perspective. And I think that would be that's the structure, that's the info you need from my side. And to start us off, we are going to hear from Mary Ann Manahan, who's a doctoral assistant at the Conflict Research Group at the Department of Conflict and Development Studies at Ghent University in Belgium. And she will tell you about climate justice, climate injustice, who it affects, and she will give us much more information about the topic to begin with. So, Mary Ann, if you're ready, you can unmute and go for it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tali, for that introduction. And hello, everyone. And thank you for being here. And I also would like to thank Salto for the invitation. I'm delighted to join you in this webinar. It's my first time. And as Tali mentioned, my presentation aims to give you an overview of climate justice and injustice. And today I'll be talking about three things. First, the origins and principles of climate justice. Second is the examples of struggles for climate justice from frontline communities around the world. And third, what are the lessons we can draw for building fair and effective climate action, including what this means for solidarity work here in Europe. I just would like to check with Elizabeth if she can share my presentation. Yeah, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Yeah, next, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. But before I delve into the three aspects, let's talk about the context first. We know from climate science that we are already crossing into dangerous territory. In 2024, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres put it very bluntly. To keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit alive, global emissions would need to fall by 9% every year until 2030. But according to him and many scientists, instead, emissions are still rising. So this means the window for action is very small, and the consequences of climate crisis and the climate breakdown are already here, from extreme droughts, floods, and storms to entire cities and coasts at risk of being submerged. Next, please. Next slide, please. But climate change is not only, can you go back a little bit? Yeah, one slide before. Yeah. Yeah, no, one slide back, two slides back. Yes. Sorry. I think it's slide 4. Yes, yes, that slide, yes. But climate change is not only an environmental problem. The IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that provides policymakers with regular scientific assessments on climate change, describes it as a threat multiplier. That means it worsens existing inequality, problems of poverty, hunger, displacement, health risks, etc. And here is the injustice. Those who are most responsible for emissions, such as wealthy nations and elites, will likely not suffer the worst impacts. Meanwhile, those who contributed the least, such as farmers, indigenous peoples, workers, poor communities in the global south, are among the most exposed. So from the beginning, climate change has always been about inequality. Next, please. Climate justice is often thought as a new phenomenon, but it has a longer genealogy dating from the 1970s, for example, with Black, Indigenous, and labor unions in North America and forest-based communities in Asia and Latin America struggling and exposing the health impacts and environmental racism and displacement caused by toxic polluting industries, deforestation, dam building by governments and corporations. In academic literature, this is often called as the environmentalism of the poor or grassroots environmentalism. But climate justice as a movement, as a concept, really took off in the late 1980s and early 1990s when Global South voices challenged the idea that all countries are equally responsible for global warming. In fact, a very important landmark 1991 report by Indian scholars Anil Agarwal and Sunita Narain, Global Warming in an Unequal World, introduced the distinction between survival emissions, which are produced by poor communities meeting basic needs, and on the other hand, luxury emissions, which are linked to excessive high consumption lifestyle of the wealthy. So this framing and distinction expose the injustice of blaming the global south for a crisis that is driven largely by industrialized countries and elites. And over time, as this slide shows you, climate justice grew into a rallying call for social movements, combining human rights, ecological justice, systemic critiques of capitalism and colonialism. And in the last, particularly 10 years in 2015, climate justice, for instance, was included as a principle in the preamble of the Paris Agreement. And in the last 5 years, a global justice movement coming from the youth sectors around the world, such as the Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion, launched strikes against the political inaction of governments to address global warming. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is where the framework of climate justice comes in, and it's very important to take a look at the many elements that climate justice is for grounding. First, the root causes. The crisis is not an accident of nature. It is linked to an economic model built on fossil fuels, extractivism, capitalism, and colonialism. Second, it emphasizes the unequal impacts that climate disasters hit people differently, depending on their class, geography, race, gender, disability, ethnicity, and other structural factors. And third, the importance of historical responsibility. And I would like to emphasize here that for climate justice as a framework, it centers that some countries and corporations have really benefited for centuries from fossil fuel-based development. And that means they owe a climate debt and must do more. Fourth, climate justice also emphasizes the limit of conventional responses. Many political or market-based responses, such as carbon trading or technological fixes, really don't address the root causes of the climate breakdown, but in fact create new problems. And finally, the importance of systemic solutions that are already coming from frontline communities that are living in a just and sustainable ways of living. Next slide, please. This is just to reiterate some of the earlier points that I made, and to put it simply, what climate justice asks us is not just about how we cut emissions, but also who acts, who benefits, and who pays the price. Next slide, please. Next slide. In this section of my presentation, I would like to outline maybe three campaigns that emphasizes climate justice. First is the campaigns against fossil fuels and extraction. A global rallying call by many communities and transnational campaigns is a nice slogan and very rhythmic, no? To leave the oil in the soil, the tar sand in the land, the coal in the hole. And one of the leading voices here is a transnational group called Oil Watch, which have exposed as early as the 1980s the link between global warming, oil extraction, the plunder of nature, as well as the violence and impoverishment that it causes against resource-rich communities. So many communities around the world have conducted bold direct actions, such as blockades to hold the construction of coal-fired power plants, major oil and gas pipelines. But also at the same time, these same frontline communities are involved in restoration and rehabilitation in their territories and landscape. Next, please. To give you a concrete example, I just would like to give the case of the extraction in the Niger Delta in Nigeria, where was discovered in 1958. And since then, Shell and other oil companies, in collusion, of course, with the Nigerian state, have extracted billions in wealth, while local communities face pollution, violence, and poverty. So for more than 6 decades, oil extraction in the Niger Delta has been an iconic example of how human misery and ecocide go hand in hand. Next slide, please. Activists like Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was executed in 1995, and many others have led resistance struggles. And this slide shows you the long history of resistance movements against Shell's ecological warfare. There has been some legal victories that I think is worth mentioning because it involves transnational solidarity. In a 2021 ruling, a Dutch appeals court found Shell Nigeria liable for oil spills in the Niger Delta and ordered its parent company, the Royal Dutch Shell, to implement a leak detection system to prevent future spills. So this landmark decision, which followed a 13-year legal battle that was brought by Nigerian farmers as well as Friends of the Earth in the Netherlands, was really a significant victory for challenging corporate impunity and exacting accountability. Next slide, please. And today, women like, for example, Martha Agbani are leading restoration efforts. Her group, for instance, has planted a tremendous amount of 1.3 million mangrove trees that combines ecosystem restoration, women's empowerment, and livelihoods in Ogoniland. And this is despite tremendous challenges that is linked to contamination of the soil and lack of cleanup by Shell. So what this emphasizes is really a story of resistance and renewal. I just would like to emphasize and encourage you, for example, to look at the work of my colleague Amina Odebisi of Odofin, who has been working on this issue. So lesson number one from this struggle against extractivism and fossil fuel. Frontline communities are not passive victims. They are agents of both resistance and restoration. Next slide, please. The second set of struggles that I want to share is about false solution. False solutions are basically policies and practices that really look good on paper, but they really do not solve the root causes of the climate crisis, and in fact, often delay and worsen the problem. So I'll give a couple of examples. One is the carbon offsets and reducing emissions from forest degradation and deforestation, or REDD+. And there's a whole wide of body of literature, research and evidence that shows how these schemes commodify forests and allow polluters actually to keep polluting, while local communities lose their rights to the land and to their forests. Another example is the false solution that is generated by the recent race to decarbonize, the net zero race. Net zero just literally means that when the amount of greenhouse gases that people add to the atmosphere is equal to the amount that is being taken out. So this zero balance is achieved basically by reducing as much as possible and then removing any remaining unavoidable emissions through either methods like tree planting or using carbon capture technology. The goal is to stop adding to the total amount of these heat trapping gases to help limit global warming. However, and this is where the rub is, many governments and corporations announce and pledge net zero targets. However, they still continue fossil fuel extraction and rely so much on unproven technologies and large-scale land grabs, which again worsen the problem than solving it. Next slide, please. This is just to show you some of the research that I've been involved in documenting this new trend. Next, please. So this leads to what activists call as green colonialism or energy colonialism, or in the words of Algerian activist researcher Hamza Hamouchene, green colonialism can be defined as the extension of the colonial relations of plunder and dispossession to the era of renewable energies, with accompanying displacement of socio-environmental costs onto peripheral countries and communities that prioritizes the energy needs of one region of the world over another. Next, please. So, in other words, green colonialism is reproduced when global south countries provide the critical raw minerals such as lithium, cobalt, nickel needed for energy transition, as well as for electric vehicle batteries, for example, and they bear the socio-environmental costs, while the global north consumers and governments produces and consumes clean technology, and unfortunately continues business as usual. So lesson number two, we must be wary of quick fixes that simply shifts the burden onto the most vulnerable. Next slide. And this is the last example of campaigns and struggles that I will share. There are alternatives. Around the world, communities are experimenting, for example, with eco-social transitions. So you have examples that highlight community power through either indigenous stewardship of forests, or through examples like food sovereignty movements like La Via Campesina, which is a global peasant movement that focuses on valuing food producers and localizing food systems. And you also have examples of locally owned, even corporate and owner and union-owned renewable energy systems. There are also movements such as the Trade Union for Energy Democracy that links climate action with labor rights, gender equality, and racial justice. And also, finally, global solidarity networks that build alliances across borders, either for the growth, for post-extractivist economies, and just futures. So here in these examples of initiatives and action that are built on climate justice, we have philosophies like Buen Vivir from Latin America, which centers on the idea of living in harmony with nature, as well as Ubuntu from Africa, which basically emphasizes the interconnectedness of humanity, our collective responsibility issues of principles and values of reciprocity and social justice that provide living examples of how to rethink development beyond growth and extraction. Next slide, please. This is just to show you a map of the different alternatives that are already being constructed around the world. Next slide, please. So, next slide. So in conclusion and to wrap up, what do this campaign about climate justice tell us? First, climate justice tackles the root causes. It shows that responsibility is specific, not only the general idea of humanity, but zeroes in on particular actors, corporations, and systems that have caused the climate crisis. Second, effective climate action must be rooted in justice, and without addressing, for example, inequality and historical responsibility, solutions will tend to fail. Third, the importance of solidarity and care are essential. So communities facing the worst impact show us that resilience is really built collectively. And finally, that systemic change is possible from below and that they need recognition, support, and solidarity. Finally, I think for the members of the European Solidarity Corps, what climate justice teaches us is that, again, climate action is not about only reducing carbon footprints. It's about listening to and learning from frontline struggles, acting in solidarity, and pushing for systematic changes that makes transition fair, democratic, and caring. But it's also about exacting accountability and demanding, for example, from the European governments and the US, for example, and powerful institutions like the EU, that they must take responsibility for historic emissions, pay for their climate debt, and stop exporting harm, and instead stand behind systemic, justice-centered alternatives that are led by communities on the front line. Next, please. Thank you very much for listening. Just to show you my contact if you want more information about our research on climate justice. And I look forward to your questions and reflections.
Thank you, Mary Ann, for that really interesting and rich presentation. There was a lot in there, and I'm sure you're going to have questions at the end. Please also, if you have questions now, if you have reflections, you can feel free to put something in the chat. I'm not going to read them out right now, but just to get a few impressions before we move on to the next speaker. You can even put one word. I'm not going to call you out also. But thank you. That was very relevant and very good to hear. So we will move on. I see there's no reactions in the chat just yet. So we will move on to our next speaker. And this is an interesting combination because now we had a call from Marianne for the policymakers, and now we have someone from the policy side from actually Salto Green, which is a resource center that's dedicated to issues of sustainable development and the green transition. So that's Ana Luise, who will speak to us about how climate change intersects with the work of Salto Green. So go ahead, Ana Luise. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody. Thank you as well for coming to this event. So my name is Anne-Louise Dupin, and I work with Salto Green, so the equivalent of Salto, but for the green priority, the green transition in the Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corp priority. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means within the program. So again, like more of an institutional view. And just to get started, a little, let's go over the reason why we're here and the problem that we're trying to solve, which is the risks that global change is making Europe face. European land is rising in temperature faster than the rest of the world. That doesn't mean we're going to have, as we discussed, the most impact, but we are even more concerned than other areas of the world. The regions near the pole heat up faster. In Svalbard, very high in Europe. We already see temperatures rising more than 3 degrees, which is quite catastrophic. And this rise in temperature, that means a lot of dramatic weather events for Europe. That is drought, flooding, heat waves, fires. They're becoming more frequent, they're intensifying, they're becoming more dramatic, and they're moving north. Here you have a picture of the dramatic floodings in 2024 in Valencia in Spain. About 200 people died due to, again, a dramatic flood. And wherever you are right now in the world or in Europe, I think you have in your recent memory some kind of event like this. Again, maybe it's a forest fire, maybe it's a flooding, maybe it's a dramatic heat wave in your city. But most, if not all, Europeans have experienced those kind of dramatic events recently. And this is obviously a huge problem for our quality of life and even for the preservation of human life, as we've seen. This is also a very economical problem. It costs a lot to handle those events. We estimate that just this 2025 summer weather with some heat waves and forest fires costs already 43 billion euros for the European Union. And the long-term impact, which is more dramatic, the impact on the cultures, on the reconstruction, on the equipment of the communities, is going to cost up to 126 billion by 2029. And I think this is a very important number to keep in mind the next time you hear a politician tell you that there is no money to finance the green transition. There is not enough money to not finance the green transition. So this is all connected to climate change. Also connected to climate change is the loss of biodiversity. It's also connected to artificialization, to pollution. But we know that the natural resources in Europe are being impacted. And natural resources, I mean the things that we can exploit, but also just the nature around us that benefits and protects us and just makes, again, our quality of life much more enjoyable. So these are all very bad points. I don't want to finish on too much eco-anxiety, so I'll just also point out that we are doing something about it in the European Union. We already are seeing the effects of all the work that we've been doing. We are decreasing the greenhouse gas emissions in the European Union. In 2023, we saw the highest net reduction in decades, not including COVID, but COVID doesn't really count, like 2020 doesn't really count. So that means it's working, and that means we have to keep pushing, because unfortunately there's a lot of calls at the politician level to stop the green transition, to go back on everything that we put in place. And well, personally, I think that would be really bad, but I know some politicians disagree with me. But anyway, the way we have obtained those results already, it's thanks to the European Green Deal in a good part. This is the investment plan from the European Union. That means we are changing regulation, but we're also putting a lot of money, again, into the green transition, into accompanying and mitigating the climate change and the transition that we have to face either way. These are a few of the objectives of the Green Deal: becoming climate neutral in 2050. So that means not emitting more greenhouse gases than what the European Union territory can reabsorb. Also, the goal is to protect human life, but also animals and plants and biodiversity all over, again, the territory. There is a big economical aspect of making companies and workers leaders and innovators in the green transition and facing the new technologies, the new roles, the new works that are going to come with this. And the last one is to make sure that this transition that we are to face due to global change, global warming, is just and inclusive. For the European Green Deal, what it means is maybe not what we think about when we think about justice and inclusivity. For the European Green Deal, this means mostly fairness in terms of communities being affected by the transition, the economical transition. And so there are some mechanisms. Just transition is a mechanism to support communities that rely a lot on fossil fuels. So mining towns, for example, or countries or regions that are relying on airplanes or on cars to transport. That's also a big part of the Social Climate Fund. Also a mechanism to support communities, people, and even what they call micro businesses, so very small businesses, not even companies, but like a bakery, for example, or car repair shop, that are impacted by regulations on buildings or on transportation. Again, knowing that the poor population that want to transition might not have all the resources to do so. And so taking part of this budget to help the most vulnerable and the most impacted communities. And another way that the European Green Deal is being put in place is through the Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps programs through the Green Priority, which I represent. In the official term is the Environment and Fight Against Climate Change Priority. And it's declared, presented a little bit in different ways throughout the programs, depending on the sectors. But mostly it's the idea of raising awareness of the climate change and on topic connected to ecology. And also actioning some behaviors, changing some cultures, changing some ways the activities are implemented to fit the new reality of, again, the green transition. Specifically in the program for the youth sector, we talk about making learners, staff, and youth workers actors of change, which is very interesting and again fits a lot with the thinking about including people into the green transition and giving them decision power. And this is something that is even more present in the ESC program because there is really a talk about making participants of the ESC able to be active. I think, yeah, this is environmental active is the term, to be able to make a difference in their life. And I think this is the most clear and most related definition, the closest to the climate justice topic. In other sectors, vocational education, for example, or higher education, the terms are a bit more vague, and it's mostly about raising awareness, sharing knowledge, and sharing some skills, sometimes toward future job prospects. But in ESC, it's very, very clear that there's an idea of European people being, as volunteers, active, being able to make decisions, being able to join the green transition as actors and deciders, and just not following along to what's being decided for them. And this is very interesting and show that ESC and the youth program have kind of this more specific role to play for the green priority in the programs. Another mechanism, well, one big mechanism that Erasmus and ESC programs put in place for the green transition is the funding of the travel. Obviously, this is mobility programs. They're really, really focused on traveling. And so there is a sense of giving a bit more support for people to choose or to be able to take green travel, bike, train, bus, shared cars, and now boats. And that means also, and that's the first, part of taking into consideration inclusion, is offering more travel days and more extra support, financial support for people who are traveling, depending on their needs. And specifically, there is this idea of having extra money, basically extra support for people who have inclusion needs for traveling, because again, taking the train for a day and a half versus one plane ride, that brings a lot of different needs, and it's a bit more complicated than just switching your tickets. So this is one of the mechanisms of the programs to help all the projects and the participants do their green transition. Very briefly, another mechanism or lever of action that they have is Salto Green, which I represent. The important notion here, the only thing, I think you already know Saltos if you're participating in this event. The only thing is that we are transsectoral. So instead of working only with ESC or only with youth, we work with all sectors. That means we cover 54 agencies in 33 countries in 24 languages. And that means we tend to have a lot of requests. And again, we see a lot of diversity in the way NAs, national agencies, countries, different projects handle the green priority, and the difficulties they face with putting in place new changes, new practices, and new behaviors. And we see this particularly in the projects, because this is, I think, the biggest and the most obvious way that the Erasmus Plus and ESC can foster the green transition is through all the mobility activities and projects. And you have our compendium of good projects on the right, but we try to figure out if there were projects from both programs that talked about climate justice and that explicitly were about climate justice. And we couldn't find any that really talked about this topic. But we also identified a lot of good practices that connect a lot with climate justice, and again, with the connection of the green priority and the inclusion and diversity priority. You can see some example here. This is not, we're not quoting specific projects, but this is good practices in terms of either the content of the activities or the way they're implemented, that we feel is very relevant to encouraging young people to be more and more actors of the green transition. And again, not just being aware of this and seeing, decision being made for them. And there's a lot of talk about, again, turning the participants into trainers for their peers, into actors, trying to take those activities into like a pathway to citizenship, active citizenship, or even political engagement. And working with, again, this idea of actors of change within the program. And that's kind of, if you want to see the details of the project, you can refer to our compendium. But this is kind of examples of things that are happening and that either we can encourage or we can just give more visibility to in terms of fostering the climate justice. And to finish, a few questions, because you might have noticed throughout my presentation that there is no objective explicit references to climate justice in the programs or even in the Green Deal. When you talk about just transition, it's fostering help for communities, but it's not necessarily even making those communities actors of the decisions. It's not, making sure that they included in the decision process. And so that might be a bit of what we're missing in the programs. That might be why this is very interesting to have conversations about this and see how we can do more for this, either, as I said, by making the things that are already happening more visible or keep exploring those topics. There's a few things that are not really included in the program, and I don't think they will be really including in the future. A big, I don't know, but I know that the conversation of the responsibility between different communities or different countries is very complicated to put in place within the program. There is this idea of fairness and total balance between the countries. We see this a lot with the idea of whether you're on an island or, in a country that is super connected by train, your expectations are the same. And it's very complicated right now. There is not a lot of push to have those kind of different rules, for example, and say, typically, if you live in Brussels, you have much more opportunities to take the train and do your mobility by train than if you live in, for example, Greece, where you're much more further away geographically and you have less access to infrastructures. We talk a lot about this, but there is no right now official push to consider this and to change, for example, the expectations or the support depending on the country or the community. There is also a lot of focus being put in the program on raising awareness, sharing knowledge, but there is not a lot of focus, at least not enough, in making sure that everybody has access to the green transition. And that's my second point. That's also, I think, a big problem. Well, not a big problem, but a big focus in the ecological movement. We tend to talk a lot about training people, about giving information to people, convincing people that climate change is real, convincing people that they can do something about it or that should be doing something about it. But we don't often see the point of view of what is stopping people from taking part of the green transition. Is it really that they don't want to, that they don't care about, having vegetarian meals and taking the train? Or is it simply that they don't have access to quality food or they don't have access to actual infrastructure where they are? And this is something that I think we could all benefit for, at least within the program, we could benefit from to taking this point of view. And also something that is, for my two last points, is present in the program and it's really present in the conversations that we have with people when we try to talk about the green transition and how we can foster it within the programs. People are much more aware of what it costs for us to not be inclusive. So that means less acceptability. If you try to impose something to a group of youth, for example, they're much less likely to do it compared to if you make the decision together, if you get them to decide, the type of activities that they want to do, the country that they want to visit, if you put them in charge of making programs. And that's something that we see a lot. And also we, at least in the youth and the ESC fields, people are much more aware of the vulnerability of some communities. And in those parts of the programs, there is a lot of focus on reaching out to communities that have been affected by weather event or trying to protect people with fewer opportunities from the impact of climate change. Of course, we could do much more and highlight many projects that try to do this. And also there is, I think, a lot of synergies between the inclusion and the green priority. The biggest one is that we are trying to push for change. We are asking the question of why are we doing this way? And isn't there a better way that we could do this? And I think the answer is always going to be better for inclusion and for green every time you question, again, the food that you're serving at every single meal, the way you meet people, the number of participants that attend this event and who they are. The question is going to be relevant for the green transition of like making sure people don't travel too much, that you have pertinent people in your event, that they have access to the resources to travel green. But again, every time you ask those questions, it's going to be also, I think, automatically more inclusive. Still have to work on it, but it's really something that work together. And there's also a lot of notions that make sense. The idea of the situation being very complicated, the idea that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. It's not like take the train. Whether you're in Iceland or Portugal or Greece, just take the train. Obviously, it doesn't work for all countries. And this is a common approach of like trying to understand where people are and how you can help them fit their needs, trying to understand what they want as well, on top of what they need. This idea of fitting every country, every community, every situation a bit differently. Same thing with the different sectors. You don't talk about green travel with students the way you talk about school sector mobilities when you have young children traveling in group. And the biggest part is that in both cases, what we're trying to achieve is a cultural change, a new normal in terms of the whole community, the whole culture. The idea is to green all the project and every aspect of the project. And I think this is the same thing for inclusion. And so this is only going to happen if we get everybody or almost everybody on board. And that means like, again, making sure that everybody is considered and everybody has their say and everybody can influence the way we do the green transition. Yeah, so I think that's about it for me. Thank you so much for this. I hope that was clear and bring a few interesting points. Again, my main point is that there is not a lot of climate justice explicitly within the programs, but there is a lot of initiatives that connect to it. And we can really work toward making this more present and more visible. I think that's good for me, Tali.
Thank you, Ana Louise. Yes, very interesting. And it sounds like you're dealing with a lot of dilemmas there with pushing something on the agenda, but also wanting to empower participants to really get engaged. And this thing of there's no one size fits all was is also got some applause in the from the group. That's also makes it very difficult to make policy, right? So it's good to hear that it's being fought for getting on the agenda. And it's also actually because of because this Salta Green exists and there has been support for participants to do projects towards climate change, climate action that we have the next two presentations. So I will segue to that because we would like to hear now from two people who have implemented projects that are on the crossroads of climate justice. And the first one is Victor Gonzalez, who comes from an organization called Neo Sapiens in Spain, and he will talk about his Key Action 2 project about global supply chains. So Victor, you're welcome.
Thanks a lot, Tali, for the introduction. Well, as you mentioned, it's true that climate justice is a very broad topic and it's interconnected to different areas. And as you mentioned, our project is related to supply chains, which is not directly climate justice, but it's something very related, as we will see after. So, well, my name is Victor Gonzalez, as you mentioned, and I am representing a Spanish social company named Neosapiens, which is dedicated to the professionalization of non-formal education and to promote international youth mobility opportunities, mainly through European programs, Erasmus Plus, and the European Solidarity Corps. Broadly speaking, we design and manage educational and social projects at regional, national, and European level and support other public or private entities to manage their own initiatives in cooperation, always promoting sustainability, inclusion, and global citizenship issues. So yes, we are very happy to present the project From Change to Bridges, a Action to Erasmus Plus project focused on global supply chains, which is very connected to climate justice, as I was mentioning before. It is coordinated by an Austrian organization, Jugendliche Welt, expert in cooperation for development in Austria. And we also have partner entities in Spain, as NeoSapiens is, in Poland, Germany, and Romania. The general aim of the project is to support understanding on how the global supply chains affect people and the planet, and also to empower young people and organizations to take action for fairer and more sustainable global production systems. Next slide, Elizabeth, please. So, well, the plan for the next 10 minutes is going to be going through all these 4 sections. What is global supply chains? The project main goals and products. Some activities we have already carried out in this project, which is ongoing, by the way, and also what's going to come next. Next. Well, let's start with the project topic. What are global supply chains? Next slide. Thank you. Well, global supply chains is understood as the worldwide networks of production, transportation, and distribution that connect raw materials or services also to the final consumers. These supply chains are often concentrate environmental environmental harms such as deforestation, pollution, carbon emissions in countries with weaker regulations, often in the global south, even though the services find on the final consumers mostly are in the global north, of course. Building fair and sustainable supply chains means promoting fair labor practices, reducing carbon footprints, and helping communities build resilience. That's why effective management and transparency are the key to ensure ethical operation at every stage. In short, our project advocates for moving from chains that slavish and exploit to bridges that connect and empower. This is a bit of the metaphor in the name. Next slide is about the connection with climate justice, which is the main topic of this webinar. The link between supply chains, for my English, and climate change is very strong. First, there is the unequal responsibility and impact. Those who contribute least to the emissions, mostly in the global south, face the worst consequences such as droughts, floods, or displacement, or also issues related to production like the Rana Plaza disaster that you see in the image on the right side. Secondly, there is economic and environmental imbalance. Wealthier nations and corporations profit from production while externalizing its environmental costs. This is a problem that we saw during our project that it's increasing nowadays, even though we are in 2025, this is still growing. And finally, these inequalities reflect colonial continuities, which is a very important aspect of climate justice. It can be like the historical part of climate justice, where historical power structures and exploitation still shape today's economies. In the next slide, we're going to present the main goals and products of our project. Next slide also. We have 3 main goals, which are the promotion of critical thinking among young people so they can make conscious, informed consumer choices. You will see that this project is focused towards young people as it's financed by Erasmus Plus Youth. Strengthen also a second goal, youth workers' skill to mobilize young people for advocacy and social action. And the third goal is making global supply chains accessible and engaging for young people with fewer opportunities, sparking curiosity about how our world is interconnected and we have impact on global decisions. Next. To reach these goals, we are creating 3 main products. One of them, as you see, is mostly finished and is going to be published in the next weeks, and we're still working on the other 2. When they are ready, they will be published through the partner countries' websites and social media. You will see in the last slide, and also on European platforms like, for example, Salto, let's say. The products are a handbook on efficient and fair supply chains for organizations. Any organization here for example, an NGO, can self-assess its supply chain's policy and reality and see how sustainable it is. There are also help sections, practical guides on how to improve and build a real fair supply chains policy inside the organizations, and so on. Real examples. Then we have a toolkit of workshops, a very basic toolkit on sustainable production designed for youth workers. It will contain different activities and workshops that youth workers can use to try and to implement to raise awareness among their young people on the topic of supply chains, which is true that it can be a bit complex for people that didn't listen this term before. So here it will be a bit more attractive for young people, especially. And then we have the final product, which is an escape room format experience about supply changes. It might be a bit disconnected, but it's looking real good, in my opinion. It is an interactive and fun way, a funny way to learn about global connections. It will be easily replicable because all the materials are going to be printable. It will be for groups between 4 and 6 people with a facilitator conducting the activity, and it's going to be played inside a room. It will guide the participants through a storyline of malpractice by a company in its supply chains. It's not a real story, but it's of course based on real issues that happened in the past. They will have as participants to investigate different things that they are going to find out during the process, and they will find how they can help to report such situations as participants, and also during the reflection part, what is the potential impact they can have in these decisions. In the next slide, we are going to see, well, some activities that we already carried out. Next slide also. This is a bit of a timeline of the project. As you can see, is a current timeline or usual timeline for the Cage Action 2 project. It started in June 2024, still working on it. As you see, we are finishing with the activities of October. You can see, as I was saying, the usual activities in a K2 project. For example, the development of outputs in the upper part, but also we have organized some interesting events and actions, which I'm going to comment next, starting with the online training course for project staff in the next slide. We organized an online training course for the project staff, the people who is working in this project, to raise awareness about supply chains. Still, for us, maybe it was also something we were not very deeply connected to. So through 5 expert-led workshops, the main idea was to raise awareness and to make us a bit more concerned about what supply chains are. The main topics to learn about were the context of supply chains, a bit of definition, what are them, colonial continuities, worker rights, relocation, and global consequences. In the next slide, we will see some visits to local good practices that we have implemented in the 5 partner countries. Visits to companies and organizations promoting local production, fair trade, and local consumption and sustainable consumption. You can see pictures of visits to rural associations supporting a network of local production and consumption, workshops with experts in different countries, and visits to factories with strong ties with local production and green policies. They were all very inspiring actions and easily replicable to find local connection and local examples how to do things in a proper way, let's say. In the next slide, we will see one of the key milestones of our study visits. I see that in the presentation, some images cannot be displayed. I don't know why, but well, in the end, while I am explaining, you will get an idea of what the activity was about. It was a study visit in Brussels. More than 18 young people and youth workers traveled to Brussels to explore advocacy actions on supply chains at European level. They visit European institutions like the European Parliament, which is one of the pictures that you cannot see in the presentation, and also were received by decision makers of the DJ Directorate General of Justice and Climate, met organizations working on sustainability and fair trade, and also they participated in our own workshops conducted by the staff of the project. It was a powerful experience. Participants from 5 different countries together exploring about what the European Union is proposing to tackle the problem of supply chains, connecting policy, education, and youth engagement. And well, we're going now in the next slide to start with the last section of the intervention with another picture that you sadly don't see. This was a funny one actually about the escape room that we test in the project. So well, there are some future activities that you will see in the next slide. Well, the project is going to finish in only 5 months, so still we are closing the last testing phases and the presentation of the materials that are yet to be finished. In the next slide, we will see just a bit of the initiatives that are finished, and still there are some pictures. I don't know why we cannot see them. In my computer, it was possible. Well, anyway, the main 3 actions that are going to happen in the rest of the project is the presentation and the local testings of the toolkits of workshops, which is our second material to be implemented, and it will be tested by local youth workers in the 5 countries through non-formal education spaces. Also, we are going to test our escape room, which is now being finished, and also this will lead to locally engaged young participants, youngsters, in playful but meaningful way also. And our biggest event of the project is going to happen in March 2025. We will hold a youth conference, international conference in Vienna for more than 80 participants from 5 different countries. It will be a 3-day event full of workshops, study visits, seminars. We will celebrate what we have learned through all the project and how young people can shape fairer global systems. How they can put their bit into this. It's still possible to attend as participants from Spain, Romania, Poland, Germany, and Austria. So if anyone is interested, well, feel free to contact us through the info that you will see in the next slide. And last of all, well, thanks a lot for these 10 minutes to present this very beautiful project idea. That's the project From Change to Bridges, financed by Erasmus+. For more information, well, you can reach us at NeoSapiens or follow the Instagram you saw, From Change to Bridges, on social media. Thank you for listening and for giving us this sharing space again. And well, that's it.
Thank you, Victor. Very interesting. And I love the escape room idea. So you heard, Victor, that there are some spots from some countries in Europe. Unfortunately, we're also getting questions about countries outside of Europe. So we will try to address those at the end. But this just happened to be part of this just happened to be a lucky thing for those people who might be from those countries. Okay, so for our last but not least speaker, we want to hear from Katarina Kovachova. I hope I did that better this time. From a Czech organization called Nazemi, and she will talk about her project with post-growth. You are welcome to speak, Katarina.
Hello, everyone. I will share my screen and then I will introduce myself. Can you see my screen? Is everything all right?
It's not on the presentation mode, it's on the kind of PowerPoint thing.
Oh,
Maybe we just have to wait a bit.
okay. Can you see it now or is it still?
It's still this kind of presentovat. Oh, there we go.
Oh,
Now,
no. Okay,
yeah.
perfect. Apologies for technical issues. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me and for all the people being here. My name is Katerina Kovacheva, and I am here representing organization called Nazemi, translated as On Earth. We are organization based in Czech Republic, and we are mainly focusing on education, on the current social and environmental issues, trying to not only talk about what's wrong, but also and what are the numbers and what are the data, but also what are the kind of root causes of the current issues and how we can solve them together. We're also targeting the topic of fast fashion. We are facilitating in a participatory way, and we are also, one of our group is focusing on the topic of degrowth. It's a small group of people that I am part of, and we did project within the Erasmus Solidarity Corps program last year, and I would like to talk more about the project that we did last year that was called Post-Growth Czech Republic. And related to the topic of climate justice, I would like to say that within the group, we are 3 masters of environmental studies, some people that were active in the climate justice movement in Czech Republic or still are. And so we are all somehow personally involved in the topic, and we care deeply about the climate and climate change and try to solve that. And for the past few years, we're trying to find out why, even though we have so much information, even though we know that we need to take action, why the world is not changing, why it's not happening. And through the concept of degrowth, we started to realize that we need to also talk about the structure of our economic system and about deeper causes and root causes of the current environmental and social problem and how we can solve them. So that's why we started to bring the topic of degrowth to the Czech Republic and the topic of post-growth. So to talk about more about why post-growth, first I would like to present you the concept of donut economics. Is the concept by economist Kate Raworth, which presents this model as a donut, where on the outside we have some ecological ceiling. Those are planetary boundaries, which when we overcross these boundaries, our Earth is signaling something is not wrong. You need to change the way your society is functioning. And currently we are overcrossing 7 planetary boundaries. It was the 7th planetary boundaries was overcrossed this year, so it's quite recent, and it was the ocean acidification. So in this, I actually put the a bit older picture in my presentation. So we can see that the our current functioning is not compatible with a healthy environment. We are changing climate, we are polluting with chemicals, we are disrupting biodiversity, and so on. But at the same time, we are also not fulfilling human needs globally. And that is the social foundation in the middle of a donut by Kate Raworth. So we can see a social foundation could be the access to food, access to water, decent housing, and so on. So we can see that we are currently overcrossing planetary boundaries, but also not fulfilling human needs. And in our team, we are asking, how is it possible that we cannot have some sustainable and just system? And with our analysis, the problem is the fact that we are dependent on growth, which is causing the fact that we are living in the times of polycrisis. It's not just climate change, but it's also social change. And in order to solve them, we cannot just, as Marianne said, focus on the false solutions, but we need to dig deeper, and we need to look at how we can change our economic system so it's not prioritizing profit, but prioritizing fulfillment of people's needs. Finding some sort of regenerative model that fulfills these needs within the planetary boundaries. So not just fulfilling our needs, but not caring about the planet, but doing both. And the concept of degrow or post-grow is trying to bring this analysis, but also bring a vision of how this world could look like and strategies how to get there. And in Czech Republic, it's not that much talked about, and we wanted to bring this topic into the social discourse, into the discussion. And that was kind of our still is kind of the main goal of our work that we're doing in our team. And within this project, we set kind of two main goals. One was to create or to start a network of post-growth multiplicators. So people who will go through our summer school, through our educational programs, and could somehow bring this analysis either to their work and their context, or join some collective, join some organization, or start some action to kind of tackle current social and environmental problems, also maybe related to climate justice. And also, since it's also for us quite a new topic, we wanted to create the new and deepen existing knowledge on post-growth within our team and within our closer networks. And in the following slides, I would like to talk to you more about what we actually did last year. And the first thing we did was we organized a post-growth summer school. It was a 7-day program for 23 people from like 17 to 30 years old. And it was either people who are already active within some collectives or know about climate change or about feminism, decolonization, and so on. Or there are people who want to know something new or join some collective and so on. And through the 7 days, we were kind of bringing the analysis of the current state, of what are the root causes of the current social and environmental problems. Then we were talking about how could the alternative vision of a just world could look like, what is important for us, how our cities could look like, how our production chains could look like, how our relationship could look like. And then we're talking also about various strategies that were how the social change could look like. So not only building alternatives like cooperatives or ecological farming or organizing, but also which policies we need to adopt or which movements we need to build and so on. And people could also find out how they can join the action, and through these examples and also through new friendships, they were empowered to take action. And this also fulfilled our goal to make a network of people who want to do something together. And I can say that this group is still kind of friends together, and there are new friendships and people working together and meeting each other. 1 month after the post-growth summer school, we did a follow-up meeting where we followed up on what happened in the meantime. And then we also did reading groups. We did 6 reading group sessions where people were meeting regularly, talking, first reading some text or book, and then discussing the content or what came up for us during the reading. So we're talking about how, as I said, how our towns or cities could look like, or how could post-growth businesses could look like. And we're also covering other topics that were relevant for us at the time. So we're deepening our knowledge. And we also had meetings of our team to kind of share what we want to do, what skills we need to gain, how we're doing with our strategic goals. And we were also inviting people who are not part of our team, but are focusing on the degrowth or climate justice in Czech Republic to kind of share what's relevant, what we want to do, how we're doing it, and so on. And since the time is running out, I would like to just conclude it that we're still continuing in what we did last year. We are doing more of it, and yeah, the project was a big success for us and big also like a push to do more of similar stuff. And you can find us on Instagram, or we have webpage nerust.cz, or you can email us. So that's for me.
Thank you, Katarina. Okay, great. So we heard from policy, we heard from research, we heard from projects on the ground, and now we have about 10, 15 minutes to engage in a little discussion. So if you have any questions, we're just going to take them from the chat, writing in the chat. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. And we have some questions that we can draw from the registration. But before I get to those, I see that there is a question or two in the chat, and I'll just read them and throw them out and see who wants to pick them up from our panel. Camila says, we are focusing quite a lot on the inequity between the global South, Africa, Latin America, etc., where the most severe climate consequences are being felt and the new processes of colonization. How is the EU working to deepen exchanges and mutual learning with the global South? It's often much more difficult to find programs that enable such exchange, and I believe this is precisely where a major part of finding solutions that do not reproduce new forms of colonialism. And I'd like to just attach another question to that because it's kind of parallel. Tony asked, are participants based in Africa and other continents outside Europe invited to participate in your initiatives? So the general thing is, what about outside of EU, and how do we make sure that we're not reproducing the patterns that we wish to prevent? I don't know who this question is for. Maybe Ana Luis can comment on it. Maybe Marianne. Does somebody want to just share your reflections on that?
Maybe I can speak up for the program. I know there is so the program Erasmus doesn't concern only the European Union. There's also a few countries, typically Turkey, that don't belong in the European Union, but are still part of the Erasmus program. We might have UK and Switzerland join us very frequently. As the connections with regions outside of Europe, I have to say I'm not really sure. I know in most programs, they're really focused on Europe. There's a lot of focus of equality and inclusion within Europe between the different countries and the different communities. So yeah, that's my answer to say I'm not sure. I think it's really interesting, and I know there is a few initiatives as part of the Green Deal to better understand the impact that European Union economy has on other regions, and make sure that we don't just address the emission that happen on our territory, but also the ones that we contribute to in other countries. But yeah, that's the extent of my expertise. So if someone else wants to jump in and has maybe more information.
Yeah, thanks, Ana Luis. I'm not going to answer from an EU perspective because I'm from the Philippines. But I will share some of the work that we have done, especially in the past around advocacy and international solidarity work. One of the things that we did like a couple of years ago was to bring a number of experts and also social activists that are working indeed, for example, on the green colonialism angle of the decarbonization consensus and the dominant green transition that is happening, coming from Latin America, Africa, and Asia to Europe, and basically be engaged in a 2 week long set of activities of talking to their counterparts in civil society here in Europe, in Brussels, in I think they went also to Berlin as well as to I forgot another key city in Europe, to London, to basically indeed kind of point to the negative impacts that the green transition is basically doing in many of the territories. It's creating new sacrifice zones. It's basically impoverishing people and displacing people, and to basically demand and to kind of work with the local organizations to demand policymakers and politicians to address this and put a justice angle to, for example, the Green Deal and other elements of that. That was a very important, I think, initiative because on the one hand, it kind of linked, different struggles across the world, research, activism, at the same time, talk to key actors here in Europe, including the European Parliament and the European Commission, to raise this concern and to indeed kind of how do we move forward together and not replicate these colonial patterns of extraction and relationship. And there's a couple of, I think, key results from there. One is, I think, more organizations, I think, here in Europe are indeed kind of working on the justice elements of the green transition that I was talking about a while ago, on the one hand. And secondly, we did kind of talk to a lot of the left politicians, particularly here at the EU Parliament, to support and to issue a resolution around that. But of course, the question of whether that kind of changed the policy of the EU, a whole different set of question. And I think we weren't really quite successful in that. So that's again one of the key things that we're doing right now in the movement, and also the spaces that I'm part of. For example, the Beyond Development Global Working Group is indeed kind of putting this forward. And we're also doing that the same way as we approach the COP 30 that's going to happen next month in Belém, for instance.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that was very, very robust answer to this question. And then there has been a few questions about the policy side, and then there's questions about that. I'm just gonna kind of bunch them all together about how do we make the change and how do we know that we're making the change? And maybe that's a question for the people doing the work on the ground, Katerina and Victor, like some examples from your participants. How do you know, for example, somebody asked, how can we measure the impact of a project in the area of climate justice? Or, um, how can young people move from participation to power? So how do your projects enable participants to feel that they have power in this discussion, in this debate? And some examples of their learning, Katerina.
Yeah, maybe what I can share, I think it's a big question also for us. How do we know that we're making the change, not just like thinking we're making the change? So it's also about like evaluating the work, getting feedback from the participants, not only right after the program, but also, for example, year after. And what we're trying to do, or maybe years after, and what we're trying to do with our little emerging network of what we're calling postgrad multiplicators is to create an alumni network. So where we can like meet regularly with participants who went through our programs and want to do something. So they have this closer network of people who went through similar experience, and they can, for example, help each other how to join a collective or make some change, so they're not alone in it. I think creating some sort of community or connections is a big part. And yeah, so I would say that's the main kind of goal for us, not just to have participants and say bye, but also create like networks that can last and help each other. But we are also facing the fact that it's quite hard to make a change in a way, since we need, in order to create a political or social change, we will need like new structures or new forms of ownership, new forms of organizational structures, and so on. So it will take a lot of strength and capacities, and we still need to try to figure out how together how to make changes, especially with the current political environment, not just in Czech Republic, but in the whole Europe, with the extreme far right people being in power, and the wealth inequality being deepened. So I think it's a big challenge, but we need to figure it out somehow together.
Thank you. Victor, do you want to comment?
Sure. In my case, I will connect the question or the topic with the project From Change to Bridges, which is, as I mentioned during my intervention, financed by Erasmus Plus project. Well, unfortunately, the Erasmus Plus Action 2 doesn't bring a lot of opportunities to include participants, youngsters, and also organizations in direct actions from the Global South. That's true. Of course, there are other finance lines, there are other programs which allow this in a very broader way. But in the end, in a K2 project, as part of the team, our main goal to put our bit into this is to raise awareness among youngsters and to make them understand, to make them aware of the problem that we have regarding supply chains. In the end, we are part of this problem. We cannot make young people responsible for that, but it's in our hands to support them to be a bit more conscious about the problem and the actions that they can take from their, let's say, little position. So, well, in the end, our goal is just to help support young people and also people from staff organizations to make this click in the mind and say, hey, this is a problem. I am not the responsible of that, but I can work on that a little. For example, I will connect to one comment which was on the chat from a participant from Balochistan in Pakistan, explaining a bit about the reality of this region in Pakistan. If 50 people has read this message and they are now a bit more aware of the problems that people living in this area suffer every day, well, that's good. That's one of the goals that we have to carry out or to achieve through key action problems, sensibilization and raising awareness among our target group, which is youngsters and youth workers.
Yeah, thank you. I was also, it was also new for me, so thank you for sharing that. And a few more questions. We probably only have time for one question. We have to do a little concluding. But the one question that I really liked, very direct, that came in, which you a little bit addressed in your talks, but I'm just going to ask it and and hear your thoughts on it, which is, who holds the power to drive climate transition in Europe? It's a very direct question. So who holds that power? Because now we're kind of saying both policy, young people. Who would you say holds the power? Yeah, Ana Luis.
Yeah, I think objectively, politicians and economic leaders, I think, hold the power. They could make very simple decisions that could change things dramatically from one day to the other in terms of investing in train lines, for example, instead of planes, instead of investing in local economies, instead of importing. I think objectively, those are people who can make big decisions and big differences right now. I think the bigger question, or at least the question that's more productive, is like, who's willing to use that power? And people on the ground have much less power. Obviously, you cannot change the world. You can maybe change a few things around yourself in your community or in your city. But I think objectively, those people are much more likely to use that power for the green transition. So yeah, I would say definitely, like we get this feedback all the time from a lot of people, both in national agencies and in the project, of saying like, I would love to do this. I'm really convinced I want to act, but my agency is not going to pay for my travel if I don't take the plane. They're not going to accept for me to take 6 hours instead of 2 hours. Or, I am limited in terms of restaurants that I can use, or, school saying again, like, I am limited in what I can do with my students because we have bigger, controls, and those people are not really willing to change. So again, we don't have a lot of power, but we are much more likely to use it in the right direction. So I think that might be the best way to look at this.
Thank you. Anyone else on this question? Yeah, Katarina.
Yeah, I think that currently who has the power are big corporation and economic leaders who, as I was trying to also show in my presentation, will do anything in term to gain and maximize their profit, since we live in a growth society. Especially now in the name of competitiveness, I think a lot of greenwashing might happen, and yeah. But I would like to highlight also what Marianne said, that a lot of power is held in the frontline communities who resist environmental and social injustice, and I think those should be also examples of people power, that I think when people will organize together, they can have much more power than corporations in those frontline communities places.
Okay, thank you. And let's take one final question from Leonardo, who's been waiting and
Yeah.
raising both hands.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you first for the presentation. So I would like to underline again that this kind of the need to really sensibilize, to really educate like young people and youth, like the younger generation, to understand that maybe as long as the society is market driven, is driven by the economy, not by politics per se, because at the end of the game, the really, I guess, the major footprint is given by the economy and the need to grow. We need to first and foremost educate like young generations, educate like the youth to be able to use more like reason and to use more that critical thinking we were speaking before, speaking about chains to bridges, because we need to be more aware of what we really need and what is needed in general, what is human and what is not human, what is enough and what is like uh, yeah like what is sufficient to live, and not to uh, to keep it like a as a product, or like a excessive product, or something that can be related somehow to capitalism and hyper growth. So yeah, for instance, I'm just a ESC volunteer. I'm doing my project and I'm in a eco village. First time ever in my life volunteering and being also in a eco village, never being before. It's a community that intentionally decided to recreate an alternative way of living based on more deeper connection, let's say, with nature, with more sustainable practices like eating from the garden and from their own garden, etc. So really taking back on more simple and more uh, sustainable practices by doing. So
Thank you. Thank you.
sensibilizing and also doing at the same time. Yeah. Thank you
Okay.
for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And yes, this is some of the alternative communities that you're speaking about are happening along with these projects. There are happening many other projects that reflect this need to do something about climate justice. So I hope if this conversation was informative for people. The video recording will be available. We will send it to you. Thank you to our speakers, Marianne, Ana Luis, Victor, and Katarina, very much for your engagement and for coming, for the audience, for your participation. We have an evaluation that I believe that Elizabeth posted here that I hope you guys can take a few minutes to just fill out. It's very short, just your impressions of this webinar. And we also would like to invite you to part two. This is the first of a three-parter series. So the second part has to do with democracy and the connection of climate justice to democracy, how it strengthens and weakens democracy. And please register for that as well. Yes, Elizabeth will share the screen and get it. Yes, we have the schedule here. So that is Wednesday, November 12th. And part three is forward-looking about climate justice in the EU strategic agenda. So please register, please fill out the evaluation. And on behalf of European Solidarity Corps and Salto Inclusion and Diversity, I really thank you for your time, and I hope you learned something new today. Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, Talipadan, may I give one question?
I think we can probably stop the recording at this point.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
The recording
About
has
recording,
stopped.
they have written we can get recordings this webinar.
Yeah. You'll get the recording.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we are late to be with you. I will be happy to get this recording and continue.
No problem.
Thank you very much
Nice
for
to meet
everything.
you. Thanks.
Everyone, hello. Thank you from Baku, from Azerbaijan. Thanks.
Hi, Azerbaijan. Thanks for coming.
Yes, of course.
Have a good
Hello.
afternoon.
Have a
Oh,
good day.
here comes the registration for the next edition.
All right.
All right. Now it's just people hanging out, but your time officially we're done. Oh, you have more questions? I thought maybe the organizers would stay a little behind, but it could be that we have to do that on a different call. Miguel.
Yeah, I mean, while people are going, you can ask something, but I think we are ready for today.
Okay.
So join to
So
our next webinars, and if there's any specific question, you have the opportunity to write us an email or something similar. Thank you.
great, thanks. So I'm closing us.
Yeah.